Hello everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today's video is going to be kind of a reading update on some of the DIY adult summer reading projects I have been doing since my library doesn't have adult summer reading. So I chose two things to do for this project. One of them was the Weekend at Timmy's readathon, which was to read a particular book that fulfills certain prompts on one particular weekend in July, which I did. I did one book, it fulfilled two prompts, and then also summer book bingo. So I will do Weekend at Timmy's first, because it is the shortest, and then I will catch you up on where I'm at with summer book bingo. So the book that I chose to read for Weekend at Timmy's had to have alliteration in it somehow, and had to have two letter D's somewhere in the title. Coincidentally, the alliteration was beginning with the letter D, and I reread a favorite book, Death by Darjeeling by Laura Childs. This is the first in her Tea Shop mystery series, which follows Theodosia Browning. She's the owner of the Indigo Tea Shop in Charleston, South Carolina, and it is this little boutique community location where people can get good cups of tea. And one day, while her tea shop is catering this sort of lamplighter walk and atmospheric autumnal event that raises money for the city's historical society, one of the guests winds up dead, having most recently drunk a cup of her Darjeeling tea. So with suspicion somewhat falling on her, given that the man was most likely poisoned by something slipped into the tea, Theodosia takes it upon herself to investigate the case. This is a book that I really enjoyed reading the second time around. It was definitely kind of mind-blowing to me how old this book is. I think this came out in 2001, so there's a lot in here about her trying really hard to make sure that her shop has a presence on the internet, because there's this new thing called e-commerce that businesses really have to think about, which cracked me up a little bit. It introduced us to a lot of the beloved side characters that stick around within the rest of the series. And yeah, it was just really like a cozy cup of tea, enjoying it very much. I have the other books in the series. I bought a few of them used recently, actually, and I'm going to probably keep rereading the series over the summer and into the fall. Okay, summer book bingo I have been doing for, I think, this entire month at least, if I didn't start in June. I don't remember when I last updated that. I'm not sure. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and talk about the books that I have read for Summer Book Bingo, just going in chronological order with the earliest. So for the prompt friend recommendation, I read The Body in the Back Garden, which is a Crescent Cove mystery by Mark Waddell. This was recommended to me by Alina from Eclectic Reads, and if you are not watching her videos or subscribed to her channel, you've got to go over there and hit subscribe, because if you like watching my videos, you will love watching her videos too. So this was a queer cozy mystery that takes place on Vancouver Island, which is a place I have visited and really enjoyed. Our amateur sleuth is returning home to a place where he spent a lot of time as a teenager. Luke Tremblay is his name, and there is a sort of irascible, cranky man that has been going around and bullying people within the town, potentially blackmailing some of them, and he winds up dead in Luke's family home's back garden. Suspicion begins to fall on Luke because he had sort of an angry altercation with this man previously, and so he starts investigating to figure out why this man was nosing around his family home so much, what sort of secrets did he have to hide, or was he uncovering. And really, it's just about him getting to also come home and reconnect with the place that meant a lot to him as a young person. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really great that this was the author's sort of debut fiction. He's a former Hopkins University professor and an author of academic works, but I always like it when I see people in academia getting to write fun stuff too. So I will definitely continue with that as a series. For the debut, it had to go back to the library already, but this was one of the books that stuck with me this year as well, and that was Harriet Tubman Live in Concert by Bob the Drag Queen. It's kind of a fantastical, speculative book that follows the main character, Darnell, who is a hip-hop music producer, and in Darnell's world, characters from the past have sort of just reappeared in the modern day, no explanation given, and just kind of come back to life. So one day, Harriet Tubman arrives at his recording studio and asks him to basically lay down an album where she gets to tell the story of her life, how she got free, how she became Moses and like brought liberation to enslaved people on these different plantations that she traveled to. And it is not just a story about Harriet Tubman and the life of the other enslaved people and abolitionists that are in this music group with her, but it's also about what it means for Darnell as a like closeted gay black man to be free in the modern day. It's about what it means to be free within the context of disability justice, when the world tells you that your brain, your body is not worth as much as somebody who is not disabled. It was really great. I hope that one day somebody will take all of the lyrics that exist in the book and actually set them to music, because in my mind I kind of imagined what that would sound like as like a hip-hop album, but I would love for that to be made real. I would love to reread this book, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who sounds interested in the concept. Okay, next was a new to me author. That also is not here right now because I had to go back to the library. So I have it written down. It's called Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves by Sophie Gilbert. This book was all right. I wasn't like completely wowed by it, but basically it's a collection of essays by Sophie Gilbert, who is a staff writer for The Atlantic that does a lot of work surrounding like feminism and pop culture. And it kind of traces this evolution from when we had a lot of sort of more powerful and authoritative women in pop culture positions like the music and entertainment industry in the early 90s, and how they gradually became replaced with younger women, or in some cases children, like teenagers, because they were easier for the industry to sort of control and manipulate, and also because this marks the shift towards the increasing commodification of feminism. So feminism, instead of being your political ideology or something you do, gradually becomes something that you can buy. So it was interesting. Each chapter was kind of a different essay about a certain aspect of pop culture. There were chapters about the music industry, the fashion industry. There was a chapter about the shifts that have taken place in the porn industry as well, and kind of how that's led to some of the really rampant sexism that we see in a lot of places online too. I just think that overall the book wasn't quite the sum of its parts. It really felt like it was a collection of articles that read together without a super strong thesis, I suppose. It was just more something that was like emergent, almost like an anthology of the author's previous work. So that was a little bit less to my taste, but I think that could also have been because I'm already very familiar with this topic, and so there wasn't really anything in it that was majorly revelatory to me as a thesis. Your experience might be different if you haven't read that much about this. Okay, like I already wrapped up Death by Darjeeling, but that fulfilled the prompt for flowers on the cover because it's like a whole garden with these, I think, yeah, roses it looks like, and then just other flowers on the cover here. Let's see. Okay, next up was my nonfiction read. I'm going to have read a lot more nonfiction reads, but this one explicitly counted towards the nonfiction prompt, and that was Just Add Water, My Swimming Life by Katie Ledecky. She is a multi-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming for the United States. She is also a Marylander. I found it really interesting while reading this book to learn that Maryland produces a ridiculous number of Olympic athletes for the U.S., in large part because a lot of the wealth that's concentrated around the DMV area. But this was just kind of a memoir about Katie Ledecky's journey from being a child who loves swimming to training for the Olympics, what it's like to be a professional athlete who has broken multiple world records at such a young age, and kind of some of the personal aspects of her family and their history of swimming and why that was important to them. This book was also just okay. It's one of those tough things where when you read a memoir that's like of a famous person, it's pretty obvious there was a ghostwriter for this, and the ghostwriter's writing was not great. So if you're looking for this to be sort of sparkling and insightful prose, that's not what you're going to get. But I did enjoy the sort of stories of her life that she told here, and I'm always interested in how professional athletes talk about, you know, dealing with the demands and the pressure of representing the country on like this major world stage where they're basically under a microscope that everybody can see. And as I said in a previous video, I've been getting back into swimming myself, so it was kind of cool hearing her tell her stories about her like childhood swim team that she swam on as well, because I have memories like that too, and it was great. I'm obviously not a world record or like Olympic medal holder though. I was very much firmly in the recreation category there for swimming. My next book was short story or novella, and that was The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar, who is one of my favorite authors and one of the co-authors of This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is one of my very favorite books ever. This is a book that is very heavily inspired by like fantasy folk ballads, murder ballads, stories about fae creatures, humans turning into animals, and enchantments. There's a lot of focus on like the grammar, which both means the magic but also the internal logic of stories and songs. And it follows these two sisters, Isabel and Esther, who love each other very much, and it is kind of their story becoming adults, beginning to sort of fall in love and feel some of the pressures of young love, but also the pressure that there is to kind of marry well and continue on a family legacy. This wasn't a book that was specifically about Palestine, but Amal El-Mohtar puts in the back of the book that she was like thinking about her childhood growing up in Lebanon and what is currently happening in Palestine and Gaza. And before I even read that author's note in the back, I really got that impression from the book, because there's so much extended meditation on what it means to be a country without borders, or a world that you can slip in and out of where the boundaries are very porous, where many people don't necessarily recognize that it exists, or they fear people that come from there as being like wild, unruly, not respectable. So it was definitely something that was on my mind while I was reading this, and I was interested to see that it was on the author's mind as she was writing it. I also loved that she cited the music of Loreena McKennitt as a major inspiration for this. She's like a Canadian folk singer, but she does a lot of like modern day bard troubadour type songs, and I love her music as well. I was also introduced to her pretty young growing up, and you can absolutely see that as an influence. She also cited the novel Lud in the Mist, which I am currently reading, that is a fantasy novel that's almost 100 years old, that's kind of considered a forgotten classic. So I will have to talk a little bit more about how that must have influenced this book when I finish Lud in the Mist, but I thought that was kind of a fun coincidence. Next, we have Isabel AnnaG and the Pot of Basil by Oliver Darkshire. I loved Oliver's memoir, Once Upon a Tome, which was about his experience of working as an antiquarian bookseller in London, and this is his first novel. This is also easily one of my favorite books of the year, and at some point I do want to buy it because it's a book I want to have on my shelves so I can reread whenever I like. It also made me laugh out loud a lot, and it follows Isabel AnnaG, who is a kind of great 40-year-old fantasy heroine whose life has not really turned out the way that she would expect or that is ideal, but she discovers some new and interesting things about herself when she comes into contact with a stolen grammar book. Grammar, again, in this case, meaning both magic, but also the hidden logic of stories and wizardry. And as she begins to read and perform certain like magics from the grammar, she learns something interesting about herself and the powers that she has within her here. This is a great sort of like tongue-in-cheek fantasy book as well. It contains lots of little asides and allusions to fantasy in literature and pop culture. There's an entire side plot about a woman who is starting a like multi-level marketing scheme for goblin fruit, almost like the goblin market fruit that, you know, enchants you and makes you go insane from the Rossetti poem. That read really like it came out of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign or something like that. I really enjoyed this book. It's utterly delightful if you want a fun, whimsical fantasy. This is also kind of what I really hope for in so-called cozy fantasy, because the stakes are definitely still there and they're still real, but the sort of vibe of reading it feels very familiar and jolly in a way, and a bit like coming home to a comfortable, familiar place. Okay, next we have Please Pay Attention by Jamie Sumner. This was on my TBR for July's Disability Pride Month, and this is a novel in verse about a young student in 6th grade named B. She is a wheelchair user, and it is a story that contains a lot of trigger warnings because it is mostly about how violence impacts her life when a school shooting happens at her school, and one of her teachers and several of her classmates unfortunately do die as a result of that. So this is also a story about her coming into her own identity as a disabled person because she realizes that she's not able to get down on the floor and duck under desks as easily as her classmates who are not disabled. This is about her coming into her own as an advocate as she begins to write this book. This novel in verse is presented as a letter to the governor pushing for more gun control laws, and it seems that part of the book was actually inspired by the author's real life, because unfortunately the author did lose a very close friend who was a school teacher to a school shooter. And so I think she wrote this book partially as a way to process some of that grief, but also to kind of give a window into a child's experience of what that would be like. So definitely a very heavy topic, still a good read. I would say that if you give this to a young person in your life to read, maybe just be on hand to provide some support and have some conversations with them about this, but I think it is very well done and very sensitively written. I also really love the plot between the plot showcasing the relationship between Bee and her little Josie. In her school, all of the sort of older kids are assigned a younger student that is their little, and they kind of look out for them like an older buddy. They help them get to their classrooms and not get lost. And Josie is also a character with a disability. So the friendship and sort of the mentorship between the two of them was very sweet, and I liked reading about that a lot. I have not been telling you what prompts these all fulfilled. Let's do that quickly. So Isabel AnnaG in the Pot of Basil was brain candy. I think you can probably tell by the review. Please Pay Attention was yellow on the cover. And then the last book I have to talk about is for a place that you would like to visit. That place is Ireland, which is the setting of Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin, although after finishing this book, I'm not entirely sure I want to go to Ireland all that soon. This is a sort of botanical queer horror novel that's heavily inspired by Little Shop of Horrors. It follows these characters that work together in this crumbling, falling apart shopping mall in Dublin that is housing a very dark secret, which is that there is a large sentient plant growing underneath the mall. Neve, the woman who owns the florist shop where a lot of the action takes place, has been secretly feeding it, and if you know anything about Little Shop of Horrors, you kind of know exactly what that entails there. And we also follow this other woman, Shell, who begins working at the flower shop, starts to develop a little bit of a crush on Neve, and is getting drawn into the sort of dark, tangled web of the secret of this plant and what it means to be keeping it alive. This book I kind of had an okay time with as well. I was really pulled in by the concept, and I do love some good botanical horror, but ultimately I think there were just some structural issues with the plot that left me not feeling very satisfied with it. Spoiler here, but the plants eat people. The plant devours people because it wants their memories, or it wants like sustenance so it can grow bigger. And everybody that the plant has eaten, before the events of the novel and then during the events of the novel dies because they get eaten. And towards the end of the book, there's something that happens that like contradicts that already very well established truth about the world that really just did not make much sense to me at all. I think that if you're going to introduce something that's like a new plot element that radically changes the logical consistency of the world within the story. It needs to be handled a little bit more gracefully or with a little bit more of an explanation as to why this could happen, rather than this just happens, now the story is moving on in a completely different direction. I also think that some of the characters could really have been drawn better. I think a lot of them read very similar to each other. I think the best drawn one in terms of voice was actually Jen, who is Neve's ex, and she is kind of the only person at the beginning of the novel that really understands not all is going well at the flower shop, and that these mysterious disappearances might have something to do with a secret she knows Neve's keeping. She doesn't know about the plant at first, but she starts to put things together and become more suspicious. She was very well drawn. I don't think a lot of the other characters were drawn to be super distinct from each other either. So it was okay. I'm not like disappointed. I guess I'm a little bit disappointed by it, not because it was bad, but just because it kind of didn't live up to the potential that I saw within the first 100 pages. But there we go. Place I'd like to visit. I'd love to visit Ireland one day, just maybe not this exact flower shop. So that is all for now for the summer book bingo update. I've actually managed to get one bingo, which is this column right here. And it'll probably be a little while before I make another update of this, rather than doing something monthly for the summer, since it's reading challenge related. I'm kind of waiting until I have a critical mass of books that I can talk about there. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for sticking with me throughout all of this. Let me know how your summer reads are going. I hope you are staying cool. Like I said, if you are in the middle of the Northern Hemisphere ridiculous climate change turbocharged heat waves, please stay safe out there, take good care of yourself, and enjoy your summer reads. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.